All right, we are live. Today we have a special student success interview. Danielle, what is up? Nice to see you again.
Good to see
We're going
you.
to talk all about your experience pre and post on the new exam. You did so amazing. So let's jump into it. Like, you did the PMP Accelerator in 12 days, and you did pretty darn good. We'll talk about how good. How do you feel right now?
I feel pretty awesome. Huge accomplishment. Yeah, giant weight lifted off my shoulders for sure.
Right on. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the before, and then we'll talk through your journey. So
Okay.
before we met about 14 days ago, because you passed like a day and a half, 2 days, whatever it was. Before we got in together and you started like really cranking down and thinking about it, like PMP wise, how are you feeling? Like mentally, what was your study process? Like what was your brain like at that point? Like pre?
Okay, so quick little recap. So I had done the boot camp. I didn't do the week or 4-day boot camp, but I did like the 4-week boot camp twice a week. I did that once with the old
somebody
test.
else, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Did that once with the old test. Didn't pass that, and then the test changed, and I took it again. I studied some. I was just not retaining any of the information whatsoever. I just could not get it in my brain. I had like 600 flashcards. I had read the PMP, the PMBOK a million times. And I came across your podcast. I was 2 weeks out, I think, to the day that I came across your podcast, and I thought, like, what's the chances he's actually going to email me back? But I'm going to try. You did, and we chatted, and I signed up, and I had 2 weeks, almost exactly 2 weeks, 14 days to basically relearn, master, and test. And, I had to pass.
Very true.
And I did. So, and I wouldn't have had I not done your accelerator, for sure.
Okay. So tell me why. Like, first of all, before we get into it, let's build some anticipation, some drama. All right. Like that. You like when we started, you had 14 days or so, 12, 14 days. Like, were you scared? I mean, you had failed once before. You said you had to pass. You got kids, you got family, you got work, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, were you scared? How are you feeling?
Yeah, at that point, I was kind of feeling the same as I was before. I was scrambling to try to figure out what to focus on. I felt like I was kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So I was focusing all over the place. I didn't know what, like, I felt myself spiraling. So, yes. And I was terrified of failing and actually having to just take it over again. The thought of like studying for another day was
petrifying. I understand. And so like when you got into it, like when you started the accelerator, we kicked it off with like you and I having a call because it was like 2 weeks. I called you and I was like, all right, well, let's do it. That's cool. Yeah. And so how did your mind start to change, or what was the experience like when you started to dive in? You don't have to sugarcoat anything. Like, tell me, like, really, like, what was it like when you started?
So, my honest feedback is I was a little skeptical because I was thinking, how can I really get all this information in 7 days? But dead honest, within like the first hour of a video, I was like, wow, I know more in this 1 hour than I knew in the last 8 months, quite honestly. It was just the way, it kind of clicked. It was like real world scenarios, watching the videos, watching, even your descriptions, and just, it made sense. Like, it's practical. You could use it in your everyday life and in your job. So that makes it a lot easier to learn.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, like you said, you learn more in an hour than 8 months.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Like, shit, like, how did that make you feel? Like, what did I do with the last 8 months or something like that? Like,
well, it was exciting too, because it was the first time that I understood the material, but I actually realized, wow, it does pertain to every aspect of my job, but my life. And it was exciting that I actually wanted to learn more.
That's cool. That's cool. And so we went on and like, just describe the process. Like, we met a couple times, you went to coaching call times, like, how did the week go? Like, so we're in the middle of week 1, like, of going through. you're learning, you're getting more excited. Like, what was it like? What were some of the things that you learned or you overcame? Like, talk me through kind of how you were feeling that first week.
So I really, as cliche as it sounded, I really trusted the process because, going through and watching the videos, and I'm a huge note taker. And I've said many times, like, watch the videos, don't take notes. It's really hard for me. They didn't. And, I just took it day by day. So every day I got on the computer, I went through the videos. Anything that I didn't understand, I would either rewatch or I would just look it up in the Agile guide or the PMBOK or whatever, or not the PMBOK, but the your online book there, and then just kind of review the things that didn't make sense, and then move on to the next one.
That's pretty awesome. And then, so we did a lot of coaching calls where we started to go through questions. Yeah. Like, what was the experience like going through questions? Like, what did you think? Did it help? Like, how did that?
Yeah, it was absolutely key, 100% key to passing the exam, 100%. Your explanation of, first of all, reading the last sentence, situating yourself where you are, your analogy of like kind of parachuting in and figuring out where you're at. In my mind, on every question, I did that, and it was invaluable because you had to do it in order to figure out where you were, whether it would be predictive, hybrid, or agile. And then once you were able to identify that, the answers were very simple from that point on. That's because you knew where you were. Yeah.
Understood. Yeah. How strong was your agile skills like when you walked into the accelerator?
0.
Zero's pretty low. It's hard to go negative.
Let me clarify that. So I would say, I thought I was at 0, but then going through and really learning everything that was in the videos, I realized, wow, actually I do this quite a bit in my everyday job, which was kind of cool, to just recognize that I'm using the same practices and principles.
Yeah, so kind of like related. And that's the thing that like you and I did about an hour. I screwed up the recording, whatever. But where we were just like, no, you understand Agile. You just don't understand that you understand Agile. So it's like, we went through it, and that was pretty awesome. And so cool, like worst week, you're feeling better, you're learning, you're getting with the coaching calls and helpful. Like, as you made the turn to like the second week, was there any point where you had doubt? Like normal, like there's always an up and roller coasters go up and they go down, and it's more fun that way. Like, where was the doubt points for you?
Towards the end of the week, going into the second week, I just started feeling a little bit more anxious because I knew, oh God, it's coming up. I only have a few more days. I just got to get through the last few videos, make sure that I'm good. But I just kind of paced myself and just followed the process and went through the videos and just kept doing the same thing I was doing. Whereas the last time, around that same time, I started to panic and I was like, oh, I have to make more flashcards, write more notes. So
how was it just following the process, or how did you manage your mind? Like, it's super important that people like reflect on like how we think about things and how we manage ourselves. Like, how did you manage your emotions in your mind going up to the exam and then in the exam?
So I will say, I think it's really, so going through the videos, I think it's really important that folks even watch it twice if they have to, the emotional resilience videos that you have. I think that's really, really important because a lot of times you just think, oh, I don't really need that, but you do, because you need to like pace yourself, you need to breathe, you need to make sure that you know the material. I mean, you just really have to be confident that you know the material, because at the end of the 7 days, you know the material. So I just kept saying, okay, I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to go through. I'm going to get there. I'm going to know things. I found myself missing less questions on the practice tests. And then the questions that I did miss, quite honestly, they were just silly mistakes. So it wasn't real much fundamental. It was more of just rushing through, or it's just silly mistakes. But during the exam, I took it at the exam center. and it's pretty intense. I mean, all fingerprinting and, locking stuff, and it's kind of crazy. But I just kind of took a breath before, realized that I'm here, I'm in the moment, I'm going to pass or I'm going to fail, but it's not going to be for a lack of trying. And I know what I know, and I have to be confident in that. I know the material, and that's that. But I took, anytime I felt like I was getting overwhelmed, I just hit skip. I flagged it, skip to the next one. Because I found that, it's a pattern. You'd have a few simple, couple hard. So if I found one I was really struggling on, rather than getting flustered, I kind of flagged it, moved on, because then I'd get one that was really easy. It'd boost your confidence. That really worked for me.
That's awesome. And the actual exam, like, let's talk about, people are always like, what's on it? Like 50, 60% Agile, some hybrid, waterfall. Like, what was the breakdown?
Yeah, I made a mental note afterwards, because I actually was really surprised at how much was Agile and hybrid. I mean, 80%. It was a lot. It was a lot. And a lot of situational questions on, like, personality conflicts and what you would do just in an Agile environment.
Yeah.
And that's really where knowing the difference between Agile and predictive really was key, and knowing where you were, because a lot of the questions would have, you're in an Agile environment, but then the answers would say change control board or things of that nature, which, you're crossing them out right away, because that's not Agile. And then you were able to narrow it down to 2, and usually they were pretty, it was, you'd know from knowing where you were at.
And I think that's, like, important. Like, I think a lot of people out there are like, oh God, there's like a good percentage Agile and hybrid. And what I worry is that they'll go out there and they'll say, like, well, I only need to study that. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's an okay logic. But you said something in there, like, if you know you have a core foundation of waterfall and Agile, then you can know which game you're playing in and know what's not, acceptable. And then hybrid is both together, so you got to know them both. Like, is that a fair plan or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you absolutely have to, because you have to know where you're at, and then you have to be able to know, because most of the answers, at least 2 of them, are going to be for the opposite. So whether they're going to be for predictive or Agile that you're not in, and then the other 2 is just knowledge based. Like, if you know Agile, you know what the answer would be. But I could easily eliminate 2 right off the bat, just by knowing where I was in the life cycle, and knowing that, Agile doesn't have a change control board, things like that.
How did you know? Did you know? Like, I mean, you didn't have any choice. Like, you had signed up 14 days, whatever, we're doing this thing. Did you feel like, I mean, was there a point where you're like, I know I'm going to pass? Did you feel like that?
So I felt like this is real easy compared to the last time. And I was like, is it because I just know the material? And it's because I know the material. And I think what a really good indicator was, so last time, the night before the test, I was like cramming and, panicking. I didn't get a good night's sleep. And then this time I ate we went out to dinner. The family and I went out to dinner. I came home. I briefly looked over a few things that I felt like maybe were sticking points, got a good night's sleep. I was pretty early to the test center. And I mean, I had every intention of going over a few things, but I decided I'm just not going to. I ate lunch and I went into the test.
So you think, like, that calmness, like your body, your brain, whatever, knew, like, hey, we got this. Like, there's no need to cram. Like,
yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah,
that's cool.
And that's mainly just by truly knowing that I know the material, if that makes sense.
Entirely. That's my life is committed to this. So, you have perspective. You've taken the bad training, the boot camps, the whatever, the books, the flashcards, all that. Like, is there something wrong with traditional training? Like, for some people, or maybe for yourself, like, is there something wrong? And if so, what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think that it's death by PowerPoint a lot, and it's just total regurgitation of the PMBOK, word for word, essentially. And that's just not really a conducive way to learn. You really need to learn by example and real world scenarios, and you need to be able to relate it to something so that you can kind of pull it out of your hat when you need to. And something else that really stood out was the way that you structured understanding like the flows of things is so different than the training that I had gotten before, because they're going through the PMBOK and, you have, the charter and the stakeholders, it's like 1 through, and the other one's 41 or whatever it is. So you're going through and you're not seeing the relationship between them. You're just getting the information and you don't really know how it connects. And that's really important too.
Yeah. If we can, that's a big one. So like seeing how it connects. So like for you, it sounds like the throwing information at you and be like, yo, you're on your own, you'll be fine. Didn't work. So like the connection seemed to connect with you. So that's awesome. I'm glad that worked. Yeah. What do you think? Let me see. Like, what do you think some of the biggest mistakes that students out there might make? Like you studied for months, right? Like, but like, what are some of the mistakes that people make?
So I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was thinking that I need to know kind of all the terminology, because I focused on a lot of that, but I could tell you what they mean, but I don't really know what they mean. So a good example is like user stories. Like, yes, I know the definition and I knew the definition from taking the other boot camp, but I didn't really understand them until I watched your video on it. And I was like, oh, that's what they are. It's pretty simple. So things like that. I think that you're trying to get all this information. You're taking this giant book and thinking that you need to cram it all into your brain, but it's really understanding the process of how things work rather than just, reading chapters upon chapters.
That is awesome. So, I mean, do you feel like you're a better project manager from going through the accelerator and the process of learning? It's only 2 weeks, but do you feel better at it?
100% I do. I feel like I'm far more confident after taking the accelerator than had I still studied and passed, not having gone through it, because I truly understand. So if someone's asking me something, I can explain rather than just being like, oh no, yeah, I know what the definition is, but I really don't know what that means. And being able to apply it to my job and actually my everyday life. I think once you go through the accelerator, you realize like, wow, we use all this stuff all the time in everyday life, especially as a mom.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to being a mom, but I got a mom and a wife. So like, so yes, I would agree. Well, that is awesome. I mean, it means a lot to us that like it connected and it made you feel like you're better at what you do and brought the goodness out that you already had inside of you. So that's awesome. Now, you only had 2 weeks. You worked with me a good amount and you worked with some of the other calls. Like, you touched the community a little bit. Like, did that have any kind of influence, or was it helpful, or whatever, like the calls and the other students and stuff? What was the deal there?
Yeah. So just knowing that I could reach out and ask a question, get an answer, or not, if I didn't understand something, was huge. Taking the boot camp I had done before, like I said, it was just death by PowerPoints. And I mean, I had no reach back. I had nothing. I just had a lot of PowerPoint slides that did nothing for me. But being able to like get on calls and listen to other like actual human beings talking, it just kind of gives you that sense of like, everyone's in the same boat. Everyone has their own struggles. Everyone's going through the same thing. Other people are passing. Like, you can do it. We can all do it. And you just gotta put your faith in the fact that you're smarter than you think you are and that you can get through it.
That's beautiful. I would agree 100%. So, I mean, as we go out there, there's probably people out there that are struggling. Now, you've given them tons of advice, but if we were to distill it down and be like one or two things that you think that will help turn struggling people around, what would be your guidance advice for those struggling students?
Well, sign up for the accelerator, one.
Good first step. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Just really focus on kind of what you said, like following the process. Like, trust that you and your team, they know what they're doing. They've done it. They've tested this out. And as much as you might feel like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure, like, go through it. And anything that you're not understanding, just go back and rewatch. Or, I mean, the other thing I did was, you know, driving to the store, I would put on your podcast, or anytime I was in the car or even just working out or anything, I would be putting on something that I might not have understood if I had gone through the videos. So I was just constantly absorbing the material in, you know, different ways, and that was helpful. So the other thing that I really thought about, and I kind of, as I was going through, was kind of trying to implement, was everything that I was learning, I was trying to like think, how does this apply to me? How do I do this? Or how could I do this? Because then it gave me a frame of reference, and I was like, oh, like, for instance, there was a question on the test, and I'm like, oh, I remember I thought to myself that I had done this in this project, or, you know, so it kind of, it triggered the memory, which then also triggered like, oh, I remember seeing that in the video. So it's like muscle memory.
Yeah. That is a genius one at the end. Like that's a pearl for everybody out there, that what you just said is like you, and I'd like to talk to a little bit more, because I push this idea all the time. Is like, you said you put yourself in the process, like, how have I ever done this? What would I use it? Could I ever do it? Stuff like that. So when you started to do that, like, did it feel natural? Like, what was happening in your head when you started to do that? Because obviously you weren't doing it before.
Yeah, all of a sudden I was like, this makes total sense. Like, I'm actually doing this. This is what's happening in my job. This is what's happening like in my personal life. Like, this makes total sense. And then when you get into a situational question and it kind of comes up, you're like, oh, yeah, I've got this, because I remember this is what happened on this project, or some of the things that maybe I didn't understand. I thought like, well, how could I put this into my project, or how could I put this into my house, my personal life? So, you know, like risk assessment. Well, I don't really do that, but how could I do it? Lots of ways. So just having those like little scenarios, so like the videos that you have on like the skits and things like that are helpful. But then I tried to like make my own in my head, if that, you know.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's how I got them. Like, I made all that stuff up in my own brain. I was like, well, how do I made up a character that's my buddy in real life, John. And so I just made him go through the process.
Yeah.
And if you can do that and you did it, then you start to make it real. And the cool thing is, like, when you start doing that, people start to say, like, they start to have more depth to the questions, because they're like, well, wouldn't this happen? And they're like playing through the examples. You're like, oh, that's cool that you've worked through that. Yes, that would happen. And think about the consequences and all those things. So yeah, it's like a snowball. It just takes effect. So that's awesome.
And I would say that I think that I would confidently say that I came into the Accelerator not really knowing much after going through it. Like, I thought I knew stuff, but then I realized I did not have a handle on it. And I honestly would never have passed. Never. If I hadn't gone through it.
I'm very, very happy that we met 2 weeks ago. I'm very, very happy that you wrote and that we were able to work together. It was like, honestly, like, I enjoyed the process more than you did. Oh, I'm 100% positive of that, because you had the stressful side of it. I got the easy. I already knew the end of the answer. Like, you're going to do it. You're going to pass. I knew you had the glint. You were like,
it was far less stressful, I must say, though, because I felt like I really was getting a grasp of the material. So it wasn't as scary. It wasn't as overwhelming. It was more of like, okay, yep, I don't really understand this, but I'm going to get there. So it was far less intimidating overall.
Well, that's the good thing. I mean, you never really looked rattled. I mean, you were just focused and dialed in. You weren't working 20,000 hours a day studying, burning things down, like steady Eddie.
Yeah, I think that's another good point to bring up, is that you don't need to be doing it 8 hours a day. I think what's important is watching the videos and then kind of thinking throughout the day, how am I going to implement this in my life? And then that is kind of your study. Like, you're thinking of how you're implementing. So I was constantly like, before bed, I would kind of like play things through in my head of things that I knew. Like, I would kind of say them to myself, and then things that I didn't, I would just kind of be like, oh, okay, I have to look at that tomorrow, because I must have not understood that.
That's really good. Because like, a person called me today, was like, hey, is it going to be 8 hours a day or 10 hours or 12 hours a day? And I'm like, well, it's going to be about like a couple hours a day. And then you're going to do some thinking. And it's like, we're just going to set the seeds in your head, and we're going to let you germinate them a little bit in a positive way. And then we're going to talk about it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I like that. It's kind of like when you go, like, I don't know if it's for you, like when I go to sleep sometimes, like all my ideas come at night or in the morning. Like I'll wake up at like 3 o'clock and be like, oh, because it's like quiet and it's calm. And I'm like, don't have any phone to answer. And it's like, oh, there's an idea. And then boom. So yeah, that's cool. Well, Danielle, I really, really appreciate you taking the time. You did amazingly on the exam. I'm sad that we don't get to go on coaching calls anymore, but I'm happy that you got your PMP.
I'm incredibly grateful for your program and for your help. Truly. It was a game changer, 100% game changer. I would hands down, I could not even remotely recommend it enough. having gone through the last 8 months of just very stressful last 8 months to a non-comparable 14 days of far less stress and much more knowledge gained.
It means a lot. It means a lot that you say that. And so I'm glad we were able to help you. And I was praying that you were 500, number 500, but you were like 497. So
oh, bummer.
Well, if you were to set your exam for like, I'm still waiting. I got some people taking it right now. So we'll see if number 500 comes through in the next couple seconds. But thank you again. You did amazing. I appreciate it. And this will not be the last time we chat. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Bye.